Good afternoon. Welcome, everyone. I'm Dawn Finley, Dean of the College of Architecture, Design, and Construction, and I want to welcome you to our annual Bob and Sherry Faust Distinguished Lecture. Today, we honor the legacy of an influential architect and educator, Robert L. Faust, and the enduring vision that he and his wife, Sherry Faust, set in motion. And at the same time, we're also looking ahead to new ideas and directions in design through the work of our distinguished guest lecturers, Neri&Hu. I want to extend a warm welcome and thank you in particular to Sherry Faust, who's here with us today, and whose generosity and dedication to realizing their collective vision make this event possible. Sherry, your commitment to carrying Bob's legacy forward and to ensuring it continues to inspire new generations of students of architecture and design, it's deeply appreciated by the school, by the college, and by the university. I also want to extend a welcome today to our Karen Rogers, our CADC Interim Dean Emeritus. Welcome, it's great to see you here. And again, welcome all of you today. I'm going to talk a little bit about Bob Faust. As many of you know, Bob arrived to Auburn University in the late 1960s with Sherry and spent more than 40 years developing a career defined by a hands-on approach to architecture that integrated teaching, professional practice, and construction, often working directly with his students to design and build the projects in real time and in the field. He really never separated thinking from making. And Faust's influence was rooted in the ethos of design build, a practice he was exposed to through collaborations with the architect Bruce Goff, and further developed throughout his time at Auburn. The projects here in this city, which many of you are familiar with, built with Sherry and in collaboration with students, reflect a deep commitment to material exploration, craft, and the intermingling of design and construction. So this lecture, I think what makes this lecture series so meaningful is that it does not simply look back. It creates a space for students, faculty, and our staff to engage with contemporary architectural practices from around the world. And as such, it reflects the same spirit of curiosity and experimentation that defined Faust's work. I encourage you all to experience Bob's work more directly through a beautiful exhibition in the McRae Gallery in Dudley Hall. The exhibition is co-curated by Associate Professor Christian Dagg and Assistant Professor Julia Amorosano, and it presents a remarkable edited collection of detailed, intense hand drawings that reveal both the precision and the imagination of Bob's process. Bob Faust's legacy lives on through those he mentored, through the work and archives we are fortunate to steward here at Auburn University, and through this lecture series, which continues to open new conversations about what architecture can be. So Sherry, thank you for making this possible. It is now my pleasure to invite my colleague and friend, Assistant Professor of Architecture Ernesto Bilbao, to introduce our distinguished guest lecturers.
Thank you, Dawn. Welcome, everybody. I'm very honored to introduce our 2026 Bob Faust Distinguished Lecturers. First, let me introduce Neri&Hu Design and Research Office. Founded by Lyndon, Neri, and Rossana Hu in Shanghai, Neri&Hu is Asia's leading architecture and design studio. Since 2004, the practice has applied a global design language and sensibility to a broad range of localities in China and across Asia, and increasingly in Western countries. Their international outlook, seeing in critically acclaimed body of work that ranges from furniture design to urban planning, historic restoration projects to gleaming new buildings, has made Neri&Hu one of the most influential and watched architecture firms in the world. Their work revealed a design philosophy that is influenced by Asian traditions, but alive in changing conditions, exhibiting an attention to detail that understands the universal importance of human experience in all built environments. In 2017, the first monograph of Neri&Hu Design and Research Office was published by Park Books. In 2021, the second monograph, Thresholds, Space, Time, and Practice, was published by Thames Hudson, which features essays by Rafael Moneo and Sarah Wyden. Now let me introduce our distinguished speakers. Rossana Hu received her Master of Architecture in Urban Planning at Princeton University and her Bachelor's of Arts in Architecture at the University of California, Berkeley, with a minor in music. Along her design practice, Hu has been deeply committed to architectural education and has taught and lectured in numerous universities. Since 2018, Hu has been appointed a Howard Friedman Visiting Professor of Practice at the University of California, Berkeley, Design Critic and the John C. Portman Design Critic in Architecture at the Harvard Graduate School of Design, the Eero Saarinen Visiting Professor and Norman Foster Visiting Professor Chair at the Yale School of Architecture. Hu was appointed as Chair of the Department of Architecture at Tongji University in 2021, and Chair and Miller Professor of the Department of Architecture at the University of Pennsylvania Weitzman School of Design in 2024. Lyndon Neri received his Master's of Architecture at Harvard Graduate School of Design and his Bachelor of Arts in Architecture at the University of California, Berkeley. Alongside his design practice, Neri has been deeply committed to architecture education as well and has taught and lectured at numerous universities. He has been appointed as visiting faculty at Princeton University School of Architecture, the Howard Friedman Visiting Professor of Practice at the University of California, Berkeley, Design Critic and John C. Portman Design Critic in Architecture at the Harvard Graduate School of Design, the Eero Saarinen Visiting Professor and Norman Foster Visiting Professor Chair at the Yale School of Architecture. Neri was elevated to Honorary Fellow of the American Institute of Architects in 2025. Let's welcome Rossana and Lyndon.
Sorry, taking a few minutes to kind of recalibrate myself. Rossana is extremely tired and I'm extremely jet lagged. So if we start speaking Chinese, my apologies. It's not intentional. It's lack of ability to translate very quickly. Thank you for inviting us to Alabama. This is the first time we've been in the not considered deep south, I suppose, but south enough. Truly an honor to be here at Auburn University. All I hear about is the football program, the basketball program. I know Cam Newton was the last hero, 2010, I believe, if not mistaken. At least you guys are in the NIT for the basketball program, so that's not bad. I do know my basketball. But I truly honored to be giving the Bob and Sherry Faust Distinguished Lecture. Sherry, thank you for giving us this opportunity. We don't see each other often. We're in different parts of the world. This allows us to actually be romantically linked again. Thank you, Dean Don Findley. Thank you, Justin Miller. And of course, thank you, Ernesto Bilbao, for this wonderful opportunity. The title of the talk today is called From Here to There. From here to there is also another way of defining the moving of spaces or moving between spaces, the in-between, the liminal space of what is commonly called the threshold. From here to there is also our constant search for meaning and purpose, our search for belonging, our search for home. Home means different things to different people. It also means different things to the same person. at different stages of his or her lifetime. Thresholds are important because we constantly traverse between locations, not just in personal travels, but early on, my partner Rossana and I went to the US, I guess the US here, for our studies from different parts of Asia. And we used to travel to Shanghai and different parts of Asia for work for different firms. But after moving and establishing our practice in Shanghai, where Rossana's father is from, we now reverse that direction and travel to other parts of Asia, to Europe, the Middle East, Africa, for work, and now back to the Americas to teach and, of course, work. The notion of traversing between space, time, and practice has long been embedded in our architectural practice. 3 years ago, our exhibition of the studio's work in Berlin showed 17 years of what we called work in progress. The lecture today will examine a series of contemporary issues in various global contexts and aims to shed lights on how the firm grounds its work. The image here shown on the two screens to the right and the left is an extension to our mural museum, which we finished 2 years ago. But about 20 years ago, we actually finished a hotel that surrounded this museum, which is quite interesting because the same client came back to us with a completely different program and requested us to have a completely different transformation on the work we present. This allows us to show that our work not only crossed between location, cultures, but also between typologies, and to a certain extent, the growth in which the practice has begun. Threshold also means that we have to continually maintain an intellectual inquiry into adaptive reuse, the role of history, and reimagine spatial legibility associated with voyeurism, and of course the role of collective memory, reflective nostalgia, fragments, and in many ways the idea of Roinophilia. And we will explain that a little bit more. Jean Nouvel used this project of ours in Fuzhou, which is a tea house, on the front copy of Domus when he was the creative director with this particular title, Are We Entitled to Change the Past? I never really liked Jean Nouvel until he put us on the cover, and all of a sudden I have to rethink that perhaps he was a good architect that we should consider. In some of the projects under construction's idea of tectonics and the use of poche, which is shown here, a recent vocational school project in Chongqing Island that is now under construction, deals with many in-between spaces between programs. Or perhaps this in-between is a search for a connection back to the vernacular, a project in Jingdezhen, which is considered the pottery capital of China, deals with a notion of a public space that needs to connect back to the vernacular. In that particular project, David Chipperfield is next to us with an Arata Isozaki building across from us, all required to design in red bricks. And so we pushed the mayor to allow us to have red terrazzo and red concrete, and we managed to convince him. But that model is not just red for effect. It'll be completed in a year's time. You will see it'll be all red. The in-between could simply be about the new and the old. Obviously, the more obvious divide you can say is about the past and the future, east and west, or perhaps like this chapel we are working on right now, the divide might be about interior and exterior, the artifice and the landscape. Or perhaps like this factory that's on the board right now, where the divide is about global and local, urban and rural. We find that identity is no longer easy to define. Are we defined by our passports, the color of our skin, the accent with which we speak, or the topping we put on our pizza? A recent project in Paris, a small Italian pizza restaurant owned by a Parisian. You remember Italian pizza, owned by a Parisian, helmed by a famous Japanese chef. They decide that confusion was not enough. They decide to hire a Chinese practice to complete the whole mix. You can imagine the many languages barriers throughout the whole design process and in between to get this small project done was harder than you could possibly imagine. We cross divides like never before as people and as designers, threshold with different variations, often crossing divides that tradition, institution, society, or even what our profession has predetermined, divides between the city and the periphery, tradition and the new vernacular. But other more nuanced divides we feel have over the years become themes that helps us analyze our new projects or our current projects. And in fact, today we will be organizing our talk using those themes and dualities, pairings to describe many of our projects. This is the Shanghai Theater project we did about 7 years ago, sort of invading the threshold of a theater entry by expanding the sidewalk into the theater proper. We touch on that subject with our installation at the Venice Biennale 2 years ago, addressing the theme liminality, finding an architectural articulation for the quality of ambiguity and disorientation between the threshold of old and new, outside and inside, urban and rural, refinement and roughness. As literary critic Terence Hawkes once quoted, "The true nature of things may be said to lie not in things themselves, but in the relationship which we construct and then perceive between them." As a practice, this place we call home now, Shanghai or China, sets the stage for our design explorations. This is also the title of our second monograph, Threshold Space, Time and Practice. The entry of the office became that cover of our new monograph published last year by Thame and Hudson. Literally an outdoor condition. When client comes in, they don't really know where they are, and that's where we want them to be.
So before we get into projects and showing you our projects, we thought this is an academic institution. We're at Auburn University, and we want to bring just a bit more kind of context and concepts to our work. And this first image is by photographer Wang Jingsong. It's made from photos found in a period of mass destruction, mass demolition in China. It happens to also be when we first got to Shanghai in 2003. This character here, Chai, it means to demolish or remove. And it is written all over kind of buildings and doors and windows that the city wants to take down. When you walk in the streets of Shanghai during that period, you easily see entire blocks with this character written. And you get so used to it that you almost don't see it after a while. And then a few years later, as China prepared for the 2008 Olympics, the whole country got caught up in a massive building boom. China was suddenly in the spotlight on the world architecture stage. Developers, they competed to outdo each other with eye-catching designs. But these forms, they often have nothing to do with their actual surrounding or their context. Early in our practice, we took on many adaptive reuse projects that made us wrestle with the questions of history, of heritage, and of culture. We like to juxtapose old and new. We reinterpret local building types and also celebrated ordinary, everyday, and often overlooked elements. These work, they feel even more urgent now, this kind of attitude towards adaptive reuse. With the climate crisis, adaptive reuse isn't just about design. It's about cutting waste, saving embodied carbon, and also building resilient futures. The context in China during our startup years was super speed urbanization, which created the fastest construction and development in human history. So just to give you a context, from 1980 to 2023, China's urbanization increased dramatically from 19% in 1980 to 66% in 2023. That means between 2000 and 2010, urban land expanded by 83% and urban population grew 45%. It also involved moving approximately 450 to 500 million people from rural to urban areas between 2000 and 2003. And I repeat, 450 to 500 million people. That's just really quite incredible. And this resulted in kind of, different things socially, especially in the rural area. 1 out of 6 families in China have been evicted and relocated since early 1990s. When you build, you have to first demolish. As urbanization transformed cities and also changed how people live their day to day, we began to see new forms of urban leisure emerging, alongside some pretty dystopian and alienating social scenes like this one. This is just how people spend their weekends in the city of Chengdu, or Chongqing, sorry. And on the rural side, China's vernacular villages, they were built around Confucian family ideals as clusters of traditional homes. Those things were fast disappearing. And the Ministry of Housing cataloged roughly 9,000 historic villages based on their structures and intangible cultural heritage. And about 80% of them are rural. Yet despite this recognition, they're also being abandoned at an unprecedented rate. Another major issue that we saw was able-bodied people leaving rural homes for city opportunities. Each empty chair here represents an absent family member. This forces us to rethink our role as architects. How do we treat the past as we move forward? These two kind of external forces, they frame the question. On the urban side, Michael Wolff's photography captures that captures this phenomenon that building frenzy produced. Anonymous cities stripped of personality. And on the other side, a typical Shanghainese alleyway, like our own home where we live in Shanghai, is this threshold between tradition and modernity, and kind of, watching both worlds collide. So how do we relate to what is disappearing? Svetlana Bohm, she describes 2 attitudes in The Future of Nostalgia. That's her book. Restorative nostalgia is a concept that she coined, tries to literally reconstruct the lost home, bring it back exactly to what it used to be. But there is another concept called reflective nostalgia, and that is longing for home while knowing you may never arrive home. And that's okay, because in that search, in that process of going home, something innovative happens. So we will be showing 4 sets of projects, each set within a conceptual pairing. And the first project will, the first project of the first set is this project, Nantou City Guest House in Shenzhen. So we start in the south of China, in Nantou, Shenzhen. And it's a city that is known without a history, except maybe small fishing villages like this one that remains vibrant inside a modern metropolis. Some distinct characteristics were retained. It maintained a lot of narrow alleyways, dense housing, organic piazzas, and also a close-knit social network. It's an 8-story existing building, and we were asked to transform it into an 11-room guest house. This was the existing building. Life here is so colorful, we wanted to connect this new life of an old building back to the city's fabric. Rather than simply just mimicking the past or applying a superficial material effect, we were more interested in unearthing the possibilities hidden behind the past by carefully stitching the building into existing fabric and first keeping the existing facade almost untouched. And then finding a delicate balance between engaging with the urban fabric and this kind of autonomous form making of architecture. This interplay between context and interdependence shapes the project's approach to adaptive reuse. As Dan Graham observed in Meta Clark's 1975 work, Conical Intersect, this methodical building cuts served dual purposes. With the aid of the periscope, viewers could look into the interior of the Meta Clark building as a sculpture, but also through the conical boring out into those other buildings that embody past and present eras of Paris. So we gave a new kind of vertical access where we almost saw as that we cut through the building massing, allowing incisions to open up a new public realm. These cuts, they changed the patterns of movement and use. And the facade strategy was using new layers of cladding, like sheer screens to dress up the existing facade. Old and new are juxtaposed here throughout the building to celebrate ruins. A view looking down the stairway that we opened up, where the stair acts like a hinge, simultaneously connecting and also dividing spaces. They reveal this unresolved tension in the site's history. There are 9 different rooms in here, 9 different sheltering rooms. This is like a guest house. And just to kind of flip through some of the different interiors. And the staircases that you saw a while ago, they lead you up to this rooftop, a public terrace where you see the rich lives of other buildings' rooftops across the city. This is a public entrance opening to a public plaza. And I will just move quickly to a film. So the sliver of sky you see here from below, from the urban villagers' super narrow alleyways, is a distinct characteristic that's brought to the renovated project. This extreme density and close-knit social networks with unsupervised children, street vendors that are so lively, they create a stark contrast with the modern high-rise that surrounds them. And we were really looking for a delicate balance between what I said a while ago, the engagement with urban fabric and also autonomy of the architectural form. This interplay between context and dependence was something that really shaped the process of the design. And also to engage with the organic circulation that is quintessential to urban fabric. The guest house's access and public realms are designed to be woven back to the network of intricate alleyway found on the site. And this is from one of those alleyways leading to our building. A new site entrance is created here. And neighbors who are passing by the building, they're invited to, if they don't come in, they can peek through some of the openings that show you what is inside. Old and new are also juxtaposed throughout the building, not just as symbols or reminders of the past, but following Svalana Bohm's assertion that ruins can take on a different logic, which is not romantic, not Baroque, not melancholic, but a form of toleration of disharmony. This is a guest room of a guest house of 12 rooms. And the disharmony is shown in many details, including the original facade, veiled in corrugated metal, and also different kinds of juxtaposition of materials, and also their finishes or sometimes lack of finishes. This is just peeking through one of the windows, looking at the neighboring building. So that project is paired with this one, the sanctuary, the Suzhou Chapel in Suzhou. So we were down south, we were like 30 minutes away from Hong Kong. And now we're moving up. This is now an hour and a half away drive from Shanghai, so kind of central China. And this left drawing is an important contemporary it's by an important contemporary painter, Wang Guanzhong. His work is shown here to represent this region's cultural aesthetic in blending traditional ink techniques with Western modernist approaches. We like it that he shows a new kind of vernacular sublime, characteristic of the white walls and the gray clay tiles that are found in the Jiangnan water towns. The program of this project called for a small chapel, a non-denominational chapel, to serve as the main lighthouse for a larger wellness residential campus. The approach to the chapel is important to note. It starts with the brick wall entry, and the sections showing the side stairs, which you will see later on as being quite important also. And it's the stairs that also stitch the spaces together. So this pairing is about stitching and incise, like cutting up buildings. And so the stairs that also stitch the spaces together through one's moving up and down and journeying through the chapel. You could come to the mezzanine level. It hovers overhead to accommodate extra guests, and also includes a catwalk that wraps around the chapel. From the back of the mezzanine, you could also go out to here on top of the brick walls, the brick walks, to gain a view of the whole village. Tectonically, the white volume is specially treated with 2 layers of exterior metal, or the 2 layers of exterior. The inner one is a simple kind of white concrete box, punctured on all sides with scattered openings. The outer layer is folded and perforated metal skin. So the chapel is literally on the lakefront, a serene and very scenic part of Suzhou. And Suzhou, if you don't know, is a town that is famous for its traditional Jiangnan gardens. So the Chinese classical gardens are, all the important ones are in this ancient city. It's kind of like the Venice of China. And the approach, when you come to the chapel, is through a brick walk, where you'll see different heights of walls interwoven together, and each one creating a different choreographed journey, taking you at the end to the building itself, to the entry of the building. And this is that entry court. From the entry court, you enter. This is the mezzanine, and the mezzanine is integrated into a wooden louver, sort of like a caged element, which kind of also wraps around all 4 sides of the main hall. The mezzanine, looking down at the main floor chapel. And I said the staircase on the side is an important feature. It allows visitors to roam up and down, seeing different views inside and outside of the chapel, also, out to the exterior landscape. But it allows you, if you're not used to being in a chapel, you can just stay outside, but still be engaged in the happenings of the events that's happening in the chapel proper. The white volume is a simple box punctured on all sides, and at night it acts like a veil that both hides and reveals.
So the second pairing is present and absent. So the pairing of presence and absence explore how the tensions situated at thresholds and boundaries generate different spatial construct. And we will show you two different projects that represent both present and at the same time absence. So they're not really diametrically different ideas. While they are, to a certain extent, they can also combine and be one of the same. So the first project is the Void, or the Aranya Art Center. This is about 3 hours east of Beijing in a little village called Qinghuangdao. So when we were called to do this project, I took the call. I'm the optimistic of the two of us. So naturally, I said yes, because I was thinking vector architects. Some of you probably know their work, and open architecture. Actually, open architecture, Hu went to Rice, so maybe you know him. But it was quite interesting, because naturally, when I was thinking about this site, I was thinking of tranquil azure water, beautiful sky. And naturally, I just said yes. And Rossana goes, did you even manage to ask where along the coastline our site is? I said, no. Let's just go have a site visit. Well, I was really, absolutely, she was right, I was wrong. The client told me, don't worry, Lyndon, you're gonna have a beautiful Mediterranean village. But that Mediterranean village is a fake Mediterranean village. You know, China is very good at copying, including a whole Spanish village. And he showed me pictures of a little village outside of Mallorca, and he's like, look, don't you think this is similar? That made me really worried. And so we decided, since we're not gonna get the landscape that we wanted, we created a void. And that void allowed us to see the sky, and we filled that courtyard with water when there's no exhibition. In many ways, that became our own landscape. So that was a sketch. Of course, I didn't tell him that. During the design process, we just talked about this new civic space. He was fascinated, this developer was fascinated with having this anchor to be that civic square or that civic building in his fabricated Mediterranean village. And I took the idea of the rock literally by making it extremely introverted, no windows towards his village. He did not know this until the building was almost completed, because they were all in scaffolding. He was saying, when are the windows gonna come? I said, you wait for a few months and it'll come. But the exhibition galleries above benefit from that opening, and that allows that circulation to go up. That very absence became that presence, that what we thought the client wanted. In fact, he thought there was a skylight above that little opening. Of course, during the opening, he asked me, when is it gonna come? Is it delayed? I said, you've run out of budget, because I've spent it all. So sometimes as architects, you have to learn how to be clever in dealing with clients. I didn't ask you to lie, just be clever. So the Art Center asserts its monumentality by having precast terracotta, precast concrete, and eventually, piece by piece, we made it one solid object. And the exhibition gallery surrounds this opening, wherein the pathway that leads you up becomes connected to this central space. Let me just make sure. So the atrium is that void that creates the architecture presence. As I said, the Art Center looks inwards towards this void to connect with the only nature. It has access to sky, air, wind, and rain. The art gallery spaces accommodate art viewing, but also take your view upwards towards the sky. The monolith, which is also considered the rock, that thick massing of the building, becomes this series of interlocking spaces that close these interlocking spaces that visitor can meander freely within, where a journey is choreographed with directed views both inwards and outward. Facade articulation and materiality of the building are heavy in nature, so that the building likens a solid rock setting firmly in the shifting environment. smooth surface reflect the changing sky, while the molded modular units of the exterior walls create a play of shadows throughout the day. The second project, we made it a little shorter, we know time is of essence here, is a competition we won about 5 years ago. The common joke is the client that had decided to let us win the project, it came down to final 3, and one of the competitor was Liu Jiakun, the Pritzker Prize winner 2 years ago. We always ask our client, are you disappointed of your decision that you actually selected us? But this was an interesting project because it was a French spirit giant, Pernod Ricard. They were aiming to create the first major Chinese whiskey for the global market. And so they selected this beautiful site. And from the get-go, we wanted to ensure that the nature that this beautiful site that they selected was kept as much as possible. And why? It's precisely because the site is situated below Omeisan, which is the spiritual, scenic destination for Buddhist monks, writers, poets, intellectuals. This iconic image, which is here, in many ways is already that very presence. And we realized that our building needs to pay homage to the site. And we said to ourselves that the last thing we want to do is to build another spectacular or building that is a spectacle. So this icon that they had wanted, we refused profoundly. And we urged them and suggested that perhaps the landscape was enough. So from the entry of the whiskey distillery all the way to the journey throughout, it was important for us that the site became the most important. In fact, the landscape became far more important than the building itself. Some of the programs that needed the height that was required, especially for a distillery, we made sure to take advantage of the slopes of the site and hide the building as much as possible. So when you go through this space, some of the 3-story structure, the distillery, you won't even notice. In fact, this tasting room that you see is hidden mostly underground. And we use some vernacular language. This is actually a 3-story structure, the distillery, but from this viewing, from this vantage point, it looks like a 1-story structure, partially because we took advantage of the slope that is on the site. We took advantage of it by placing the volumes around these sloping sites. And you see some of these images. These are construction photos. It got completed about a year ago, so we don't really have full vegetation. But you see this image. On a clear day, you actually see the mountain. So the buildings itself, all 3 of them, frames this particular mountain. Just show you some of the images here, and we go, I think there's 2 movies. I'm gonna do a shorter. No, I think it's this one, sorry. So the problem of lacking context, in many ways, this project is rely simply on this beautiful land itself, in the purest sense, surrounded on 3 sides by the winding creek and with a direct vista to the peak of this beautiful historical spiritual mountain. The topography of the land gradually steps with agricultural terraces, and by respecting the land, we realized that some of these dramatic and breathtaking views became paramount throughout the journey. Our building, in this case, has disappeared. Oh, this film is really short. Okay. So the journey blends view of the mountain and the perspective of the river into the distillery experience itself, so that the whiskey making in the landscape is woven into one holistic narrative, in a way creating a heritage based on nature.
So this next set, this is the 3rd set, right? Remember, you're going to be tested later. Contain, disperse. And the first project of the set. So again, just to remind you, it's not about one is contained, the other one is dispersed, but the concept of containment and dispersion is embodied in both projects. This is what the site looked like when we were given the site, another very dilapidated site for a very long time. Right now we're in a city that's about 3 hours train ride from Shanghai, and it's a scenic and ancient city of Yangzhou. The program was to design a 20-room wellness retreat. It's not very big in area, but because the site had existing buildings to be reused, we had to replace the old with new programs, but also to add more built areas to satisfy the program. We walked around the city when we first got there, visited nearby Relic, this important garden called Geyuan. We studied some of the vernacular conditions there, and saw that there were traditional clusters of courtyards and some hybrid transformations throughout the years that mainly resulted from functional needs of contemporary life. And this is that crucial reference. It's the private garden that's built by a salt merchant. Like other classical Chinese gardens, this one embody the Taoist ideal of becoming one with nature. So it's about man and nature being one. And as you probably know, Chinese garden design is deeply significant to traditional culture, not just in architecture and landscape, but also in poetry, in dance, and in music. Much of the high culture stems from these garden making and garden design. And there's a conscious separation, if you study the plan, between the residential cluster and the body of the garden here, like most traditional gardens in this region. The formation, it's a traditional nice square grid. The organization is such that left wings are for residential, the middle wings are for visitors, and the right wings are for servants and supporting quarters. And there are two prominent lanes you can see in this diagram running north and south, and those are the fire lanes. The fire lanes, they look like this. Very dramatic in view. They became a concept for the feature of the project. The fire lanes, they're about 50 meters long alley, is seen as a very auspicious thing because it means rising in ranks and getting rich, and only the rich people can afford these fire lanes. So we extracted other experiences also from vernacular elements that we found, like this release of looking up in the sky from within the courtyard, and applied it to our project. So coming back to our site, this was the existing site plan that we inherited from the existing footprint of previous buildings. And I think I will, because of time, I will just go straight to the short film. So we start with this aerial view where you see a clear orthogonal orientation. The gridded walkways are inspired by the fire lanes that I just showed you a while ago. They work to do many things for us, to organize zones, to guide circulation. They define and kind of wrap different functional spaces within. The adjacent ponds and waterways that you see here in plan and later on in view, they kind of are borrowed to make up the total landscape. So you feel like those lakes are part of the site, but they're actually not. And nearly the entire project is composed of recycled bricks collected from surrounding villages around this town. By kind of dispersing reclaimed materials, we saw that the act of demolishing another building, another relic, is replaced by the creation of a new complex. So dispersion in this project applies to a spatial organization, since all the courtyards are scattered within the matrix of the walled grids. These kind of functional spaces are dispersed and contained at the same time, creating also a new landscape approach where the visitors experience unfolding views as they walk around. And this also is very much in keeping with the garden design philosophy in this area. And you'll see that thresholds are less defined, boundaries are less clear, blurring the lines between inside-outside, public-private, the old and the new. And I think you'll say, but I see very well-defined walls. But what we're saying is, even though the walls are well-defined, your perception of space is blurred. They also, in a way for us, form a kind of a new garden because, this whole area is about the garden tradition. We saw that what we did was one that defies the garden heritage in revealing the paradox of the artificial organic, blurring the zone between nature and man-made. We also saw this project as an opportunity to reinvent a new vernacular, taking things that we found in the city, in the history, in the heritage, and kind of replace what was once in the past with new spatial experiences, using material from the past to create a new context for the future. Okay, and we move from kind of central China now to the north in Beijing. This is a project about recast. It's a converted old cotton factory. We were converting the factory to a new gallery and a headquarter of a pastry brand. This design is inspired in part by the client's main product, traditional pastries. And it's interesting, we were looking at the analogy of the container as a form, and the form holds the shape of its contents, and that's how traditional pastries are made, often in Asia. A train track that used to run through the site, delivering raw materials, and the site was inherited as a shell of an existing warehouse. Section photos of the existing condition. We started by identifying how we can insert this new object within, so kind of like, molding into that form. The gray shadings here are support spaces, and they also marked by the use of new cast concrete. Sectional details, the entry, and now also we'll try to show the film and explain the project through the film. You'll see the building is left mostly intact as is, except the entry here is encased in new layer of glass and metal. The concrete throughout is molded into the existing brick walls. They form new rooms, doorways, window frames, and also ceiling cuts. And remember, it's about recasting, kind of like the pastry is being formed by the pastry mold. We kind of use the existing building to mold different parts of the functional spaces within. And those are the pastries that they sell, they make and sell here. The existing building is made out of brick, and the brick walls are often pulled back. And you'll see the brick wall on the left here, forming this backdrop for the newly formed concrete spaces, either as stairs, corridors, offices, or training rooms. Also, double-story atriums like it's coming up. On the left side, so you see that double story atrium, revealing in a sectional way how the new functions work within the existing brick envelope. Here also the double story atrium. And there are roof cuts into the concrete for sunlight, for fresh air. And while the concrete itself operates like a surface covering, its main objective is not to conceal nor to obscure but rather to reveal existing structures' imperfections. In a way, the new concrete, they complete the walls functionally, yet its real role is one of revealing as well. It unveils the existing walls' composition and the unvarnished local texture of its construction. A simple material's plasticity thus transforms to a rundown surface into a narrative, a kind of inscribing its own history.
So the last pairing is two sets of words, preserve and demolish. To understand this last duality, preserve and demolish, we turn to the term creative destruction, a theory originated by economist Joseph Schumpeter, who has used to describe the condition of modern China cities where demolition operates alongside rapid development. This became quite interesting to us. The first project, in many ways our first architectural project, is called the Vertical Lane House. In many of our adaptive reuse projects, we take the ruin and it operates as a muse in many ways to elicit certain experiences for us, but also at the same time, it is a way for us to understand how to connect to the past. This is a site on the West Bund, where during the concession era, the British led the way for other Europeans and the Americans to cut up parts of Shanghai for their own livelihood and occupation, to the point that Chinese themselves were not allowed to, or not freely allowed to enter some of these areas. There's always this joke that dogs are allowed, but not Chinese. And it became quite interesting because in the concession areas are some of the most important buildings that were built and still quite prominent in Shanghai's history today. So when a call came to our office, you have to remember we only had interiors project. So when we were asked to do a building on the Bund, naturally I thought, wow, one of 33? To renovate one of the 33 buildings? Of course I said yes. What I didn't realize was, I didn't really pay attention. He said south of the Bund. And south of the Bund was this decrepit building. It turned out that this building was not really that significant, nor was it historical. So my imagination went into demolishing this building. And the client obliged and said, that's not a problem, you can. This is not historical, it's not important, you can demolish it. I only have one request. Can you build me a building that's made out of brick? And I thought to myself, brick, we didn't have any architectural project. I was thinking of Leverance perhaps, I was thinking of other beautiful Rafael Moneo building. But he then proceeded to tell us that it is to show us picture of Mayfair, London. And I said to myself, okay, now this is a dangerous sloping, sliding path that we're gonna take. And he said, to make it affordable, I want to experiment with slip bricks. No, not full bricks. So you can see it's highly decorative. So Rossana and I convene in that critical moment and decide that perhaps it is worth to keep this existing 3-story concrete shell. And how are we gonna convince the client to do so, despite the fact that there's no historical plaque? In Shanghai, there's a historical plaque. If the building has a historical plaque, that means you can save it. So we convinced, we unearthed the space, we walked around, and quite frankly, it was a ruin. So the only one possible argument we could make was that this building was gonna save him a lot of money. And if you'd say that to a Chinese developer, trust me, it's not just an American phenomenon. They will all say you are correct. So we spent a lot of time sketching away and decided that we're gonna try to find architecture out of this existing remnant. And you see that building up above. In fact, that corten steel 1-story structure above was not there in our initial proposal. But Rossana and I thought there was not enough architecture in this particular proposal of ours. So in one of the presentation, I told Rossana, what the heck, I'm gonna add 4 more bedrooms above. And Rosanna's like, that's not in our brief. And I said, it's okay. The mother of the client's gonna come, and I'm gonna present this amazing romantic notion that you're gonna see this beautiful bun and bring back old memory. Of course, after hearing it, she said, how much is it gonna cost? I made up and said, probably just about $1 million. And she goes, I will pay for it. The son was not very happy, but that's the rest of the story. So the architectural concept behind our renovation rests in a clear contrast of what is old and new. Taking upon the fact that we have already decided to keep this old, we decide, why don't we just celebrate this? The main entrance takes you to an interior lobby, and it was also important from us from the start to not just design a hotel for the tourists, but also travelers alike. What's the difference? A tourist comes in and have a checklist of things they want to see in Shanghai. They go to Shanghai, they have that checklist, and then they leave thinking that they've seen Shanghai. We've decided as architect that there is something more to Shanghai than just those tourist spots. So we decided to bring the Lane House into this particular project. So by doing so, we thought the Lane House have many of the patina of history of Shanghai. Why don't we just keep the existing structure? The blurring of both the interior and the exterior, as well as the in-between spaces of the public and private realms, creating this disorienting and yet refreshing journey. I say this all the time, and some of you that have heard this lecture, I'm gonna repeat it again. My mom and my dad came to the opening of this hotel project, and they couldn't contain themselves. They keep laughing. And my mom asked me this question, son, is this project complete? I'll ask you 2 questions, is project complete? I said, it's complete. And she goes, my second question, did the client pay you in full? I said they did, because it's either you're extremely brilliant or your client is extremely stupid. So you see, even trying to convince, it's not just the client you're convincing, trying to convince your parents what you do is actually of relevance, is a different story. So you see this project, it was very important because in many ways it's our first architectural project. There were 19 rooms. We were stupid enough to design all 19 rooms, all differently. We don't do that anymore. You see this particular, that's not a mirror. That's the other room. So that sense of voyeurism that we were talking about, we explored. There's a section cut that you look down the restaurant. The client thought to ask both of us, like, why do you need this cut? I said, you don't need to buy artwork. The people that stay in your hotel becomes the very artwork that you have. But at the same time, this is Shanghai that we know it, the very Lane House. We live in a Lane House, and the idea of your neighbor looking into you and you looking at your neighbor is an everyday phenomenon. In fact, I have this big, gigantic glass in my bathroom, and sometimes I forget to close the curtain, and by the end of the day when the old auntie comes to you and said, Lyndon, you've lost a lot of weight, that means she's seen me naked. Granting I have 6-pack, so that's quite okay. But you see all this 6-room, you guys think that's funny, but it's real. So these are the different rooms, and now I'm just gonna go to the film. This is the cheapest room because it looks down to the reception. So this is that ruin which appears as the muse, as I said, to elicit visceral experiences, to connect that city to its past. It's not about saving any significant history, but just that a useless remnant could be somewhat preserved and turned useful. This is the main entry door. After entering, you will see this lobby in this 19-room boutique hotel. Calvino wrote in Invisible Cities, arriving at each new city, the traveler finds again a past of his that he did not know he had. The farness of what you no longer are or no longer possess lies in wait for you in foreign, unpossessed places. The architectural concept, in this particular case, became very clear to us from the get-go. In our refusal to build a fake Mayfair brick slip building, we decided that private and public realms, creating a disorienting and refreshing journey all throughout, like you see in Lane Houses in Shanghai. Each of the 19 rooms are entirely unique in size, layout, and view. The building sits on the Huangpu River, a living, thriving river, so that the added fourth roof level are made in corten steel, echoing the industrial ships that frequently pass by. This, after all, is a busy, working city. You see the vibrancy and how Shanghai comes alive. Up above the rooms, you will see the rooftop that overlooks the Pudong high-rises. Perhaps it is the future that everyone wants to see, but we want to offer a part of history with our garden for the restaurant. Courtyard shutters are made from recycled wood found on the existing rooftop. We made visual connection of unexpected spaces, not only to help one discover and explore, but also to provide more flexibility to the interior spaces. From ramps that move up and down the atrium, one gains unconventional spatial perspectives into other territories. Room towards the city. This may have compromised the room interiors to be smaller, but it encouraged guests to wander out of the private rooms and promoted one's chance meeting of people like you would in a city we call home. You'll find a lot of stairs. Some stairs that lead to nowhere, existing stairs that were kept by drug dealers to keep their opiums up above, now reminds guests that history of this building and also the city. In many ways, if you find nothing up above or down below, don't worry. Just sleep up another flight of stairs. Franz Kafka. Last project is called The Yard. I'm going to go through this project talking about preserving and demolishing. This was important for us. A big portion of this creative development program that was given to us is in the heart of Dalian. Dalian is northeast of Beijing. It's close to university campuses and software parks. One could think of Palo Alto, perhaps, in California, if I were to think of it in the US terms. That was new, right, Rossana? Even you took that. The existing compound comprised of 6 buildings dating back 40 years ago, which formerly serves as offices, warehouses, and dormitories for a chemical research institute. Our design challenge was to find an architectural language that could unify the buildings, which all have varying heights and distinct facade, which have undergone previous renovation and in many ways have become so disjointed. The client is not Chinese. In fact, the client was a Korean. And he was so fascinated with how to stitch all this together. The most prominent building of them was this was the former workers' dormitory on the side of the building, featuring a series of wooden gates and garage stalls used for workshops, car repair shop in the past. And so these are some of the remnants, some of the sketches that we started. And the concept behind the yard stems from the reflection on the project's context, situated in a hidden and introverted focus within the city, a small heaven of soon-to-be forgotten urban memory. Just gonna quickly go through this. Some of the facade that has been added over the years, we took it out, took it to the core, back to the building that we thought when it started in the 1930s, kept all the buildings sectionally and also from the material that were of importance, dated and in the record from 1930s to the 1940s. And as an adaptive reuse project, the aim was to transform this compound into a destination to serve the local community and student population. Its programming consists of galleries, lifestyle retail, hospitality, cinema, theater, and office space. And so the former dormitory that we showed you that was stripped down to its bare, we added a new facade that became the beacon that tied the whole thing together. We do have a film, so I'm going to go through that. I'm going to follow Rossana's suit, so we are on time. I think we're already late, I think. We're already late, okay. So the existing buildings arranged in a U-shaped configuration were introverted in nature and oriented toward a large empty parking lot. Our proposal completes the U-shaped figures by transforming it into an enclosed courtyard articulated by a new spatial system of wall, screen, and canopies. Drawing inspiration from Chinese gardens, we celebrate the compound's hidden nature as a contemplative space offering refuge from urban cacophony. The continuous figure envelopes the plaza to create a sense of privacy, framing a large rock feature and acts as a secondary facade layer which mediates between the old and the new. The tactile material palette is kept minimal and raw to complement the existing stucco and brick facades. Corten steel is used as the main surface material given its relevance as an industrial material which weathers and changes. Recording the progression of time, the interior design strategy celebrates the tension between what was given to us and the new insertion. New plaster finishes juxtaposed with partially exposed brick and structural elements create a dialogue between the present and the past and the present. I know many of you have written me, DM me in my Instagram account. I received about 30 of them this morning asking me to show new projects. So I'm just going to quickly flip through some of our projects on the board. So I realized that the students here at Auburn are a serious bunch when they ask serious questions and DM me privately. I've never received so many messages in my Instagram, direct, not even my account. I don't know how you guys found me, but it's incredible. So some of our recent projects outside of the comfort of our home in our newer projects that are currently on the board for a paint company in Seoul, Korea called Noro, a residential complex in Jeju Island, new Aman Resort in Korea, a retreat and cultural center in Jeju Island in Korea as well, a private house in Singapore to commemorate a beloved mother who passed away accidentally. So this project that deals with a courtyard, and she's buried in the middle of the courtyard. The headquarters and first retail experience center in Korea for Solhwaso, the skincare brand. A recent residential project we completed in Taipei, Taiwan. A house on the board in Kuala Lumpur. A residential project in Cebu, Philippines. I know I'm not describing this, but I know you guys want to see this. So some of them are confidential, so please don't spread this and go viral and get me in trouble. Rolex headquarters in Shanghai opening at the end of April. A tea plantation research center and retreat in the middle of China. A beautiful new boutique hotel in Merano, Italy. A house in Berlin. A new art center dedicated to James Turrell in Utah, the archaeological museum that we recently won, a project that's under construction in Cape Town that is almost completed. Many of as a multidisciplinary practice, we also work on interiors graphics, but I want to show you some of the product design. For the last 20 years, we have designed for approximately 30 plus European, Asian, and American brands, furniture brands like Poltrona Frau, De La Spada, Stellar Works, Ariake, La Manufacture, Mui, Classicon, and many more. Lighting brands like Artimidi, Casina, Via Bizuno, Classicon, Mui. Accessories and bathroom fixtures for Agapi. This is a way to control design. As architects, when you're limiting control, you design everything, so hopefully your client will specify all this stuff and you don't have to deal with mediocre design. So last but not the least, I want to show you our office. Sarah Whiting challenges the term adaptive reuse in the article she wrote on our project in Domus magazine. offering another term, seamless synthesis, as her preference to mean something that unlocks intellectual horizons and other worlds with particular magical precision. She argues that perhaps this should be called quiet synthesis, that is not meant to mask or distract, but neither is it meant to call attention to itself. Hopefully with this and the other projects we have shown you today, which cross divides between the past and the future, between typologies, between locations and cultures, between traditional design practice and alternative programs and functions, we are able to bring forth new meanings to architecture by its ability to construct new relationship and circling back and borrowing from Terence Hawkes' words, perceive those that are between them. Perhaps it is in the marginal space from here to there, the pairings and the duality that we find new meaning and purpose in architecture. It's been a journey for us the last 20 years, but thank you for allowing us to share with you today a part of this challenging, difficult journey. Sometimes a very lonely one, trying to convince clients, government, students, colleagues, and yes, my mother, the importance of finding a purpose and meaning in what we do. But as the French philosopher once said, we do not aspire to be eternal beings, we only hope that things do not lose its meaning and purpose. That man is Antoine de Saint-Exupéry, and this ethos is an ethos that we believed as a practice. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Oh, perfect.
It's good to sit down. Oh, no.
Thank you so much, Rossana and Lyndon, for that beautiful and very inspiring. Is it working? Can you hear me? Yes. I was just saying that thank you so much for that very beautiful and inspiring lecture. Really was very moving. It kind of makes us realize why we wanted to become architects, why we wanted to be architects. So we have a few minutes for questions from the audience, especially. So we have two students that have microphones there. So I'm going to ask you to please ask questions to Lyndon and Rossana, if we have anybody. All right, there you go. Wait, you're going to get your microphone there. Yeah.
Hi. How do you define the success of a project? Is it based on the client's approval of it, or how it serves the community around it, or some other goal that y'all set for yourselves?
Wow, you guys asked tough questions. It started at around 1
I'm really
o'clock.
impressed with all the questions we're getting.
You know, we thought coming to Auburn we were going to have a relaxing time, eat Southern food, but this is really good. You have an answer for that, Rossana?
Yeah, well, I think there are many different factors, and the first one I think you asked is, is it measured by how satisfied or how happy your client is? I hope we don't have any developers here or clients, but I would say not that we work on projects for ourselves, but I don't think that is a very high measure for us to have the clients be completely satisfied. In a way, we see our clients not as the one who pays the check. We see our clients as people who are using the building. Of course, the client is the one who hired us initially, but there's a certain responsibility in people who build buildings and create buildings. So while they are writing the check, and they are probably the ones who stamp the drawings and approve, on the planning level, but I think all of us are in the project together to build cultural relevant buildings or projects so that we can all enjoy them. And also we have to be responsible to the environment, to to climate challenges. So I think all those different things are measures of how successful a project is, not just the person who hired you.
I completely agree, and we would tell the client often, and we're very serious about this. We're saying this is a collaborative effort, and you just happen to have the money, and we've been given. We believe that God gives all of us different skills and different talents. They're very good in making money, and some of us have been given the gift to be able to draw and imagine. But oftentimes, because architects are not considered high-paying and they're not taken very seriously, oftentimes people listen to lawyers and doctors and not architects. But we have just as long of an education, and perhaps some of us are probably even more educated than lawyers and doctors. And therefore, I think our contribution is equally, I'm not saying more important, but equally as important as all the stakeholders in creating spaces for the community. But at the end, it can't just be our own interests and our own fetish and our own interest. That also is not important to us. That's why today when we were with a group of students, Rossana are not interested. In fact, there's this Chinese media that says we're reluctant ambassadors for Chinese architecture, because to us, when we see a poster with our faces in there, we're not that comfortable. We try to hide from the media. We're always saying, and Rossana is notorious for this, take my face away, just show Lyndon's. And I was like, that's terrible, take mine as well. But, we said, are you interested in our building, or are you interested in us? You should be interested in our building, because if you're not interested in our building and our spaces, then we're not interested. And that's the reason why I'm also showing you a lot of film, because I know some of you, or most of you probably can't be able to experience our spaces, and that's why the film is as close to a building and space that we can present to you, and that's important.
Thank you. Somebody else? Another question? Yeah.
Hello. My question was, with so much of your work being adaptive reuse and creating an intervention or altercation to an existing structure, does the idea that your kind of imposition upon that building may be imposed upon in the future influence how you approach the design?
Can you explain that a little further?
Okay, essentially, when you're doing, with so much of your work being adaptive reuse, does the idea that, in the future that work may be renovated again, does that influence how you approach designing that? Sorry, that was worded a bit funny.
Another really, really good question. We think about it, but it doesn't really, well, I think it depends on the project. There have been cases wherein we design with that in mind, with the future in mind. In fact, one of our failed competition entry for Shanghai Museum was based on the premise that this is only a proposal for a point in time. And we imagined how it would be 10, 50, even 100 years later when it becomes a ruin in the city. We thought that was a really interesting idea conceptually for us to build on.
The mayor didn't think it was a good idea.
Yeah, we didn't win.
When Shanghai burned down,
Jean Nouvel got the project.
So we had
Was
a
it
city.
Jean Nouvel?
Jean Nouvel, yeah.
Yeah.
We burned
It's
down
built.
the whole. We had the whole city burned down in ashes, and we're like, when Shanghai is no longer relevant, perhaps part of this museum will still, the courtyard, the 3 courtyard will still remain. Of course, it was egotistical on our part, but that was a way to think of the future. But we do, many of our projects have now been renovated by actually architects that have worked in our practice. Actually, we have no problem. But do we think about it? Yes, we do, because that's important to us. But even more importantly is the new projects that we're getting, which doesn't have any old component to it. it's all new from scratch. Those are actually very challenging for us because we have to learn a new way of seeing things.
Great. More questions? Maybe we have time for a couple of more questions from the audience. There.
Do I need to stand? So in regard to context, how do you analyze, process, and apply the characteristics of your surroundings and decide what to focus towards, what to change, and what to even ignore? And what is that process like?
So we wrote a paper together on autonomy and engagement that we presented to
CISA,
SICA. What is that called? It's like
architecture curatorial.
I can't remember.
Conference
So
or something.
so
It's in French. That's why we
one
don't know.
one of the points that we were making was, how do you deal with a context that you relied on during the construction, and by the time you're over, it disappears? Because that happens in China all the time. Or if you look at Waterhouse, a lot of the apertures, a lot of the openings dealt directly with the alleyways and the context and the beautiful roofscape. A lot of the viewings were dependent highly on the context that was there. But we came to the conclusion after, you imagine after the demolition, many of the people that would come to our hotel would look at this aperture and goes, what were you trying to do? It's really strange. Some of your windows are down below and it's looking to nothing, because obviously the context that we were addressing to has already disappeared. But we find that to be quite fascinating, because that in itself becomes that ruin, that in between, and that building itself allowed us during the process of understanding the context, be the context itself at the end. I don't know if you understand what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, I think there's no real formula to how we approach each project. They're all different. But like Lyndon said, sometimes you see it as like an archaeological dig when you find something historic or a remnant, and then when you go to the site and when you dig, you discover things. And we like to go to a site and discover. Waterhouse became Waterhouse, and that's the project Lyndon showed on the Bund, where his mother went in and asked if it's finished. That project there was like this moment when we were at the site. I think it was the first site visit. There was this moment of us talking to each other and pointing to different things in the site that we decided, hey, why don't we just keep this? And we were not intentionally wanting to keep it, nor was it the project's brief by the client, but it was just kind of this moment of like an aha moment, like, hey, wouldn't it be great if everyone who comes to the new building see what we see, and what we see is part of this new building. And that also became, I think, the real significant part of that story is that became a way for other architects in town to start to discover their own city. And we started seeing, I think, maybe 5-6 years later, it became a really, really popular project, and other designers started to work with adaptive reuse. It kind of became a movement. Yeah.
Great. We have maybe time for one more question.
Hi there. Thank you so much. So lovely. I think the last time I heard you two give a lecture was at Princeton, and I got a chance to sit at dinner with your furniture manufacturer who came. And what's interesting in both is he says whenever he's close, he's always intent on listening to the stories that you tell about your buildings. And the story even from last time to now has evolved. So the sort of question I have is, when you go to a client, what's the story that you tell in order to be able to get the type of projects that you get? Because each one is different, and at times there seems to be a lot of negotiation. What's the story that you tell within your firm as you're working that allows for it to develop? And perhaps out of those, what's the story that you tell to us? And is it a combination? Is it different? And I guess it's trying to know what the story is that really makes the buildings that you make, that you design.
Well, that's a really great question, and that question is going to keep us thinking for a very long time. I would say the beauty of what we do is that while the stories transform with each given context, the way we work also change and transform, but also that the project themselves are stories. The project themselves hopefully tell their own story, and then the people who come to these projects each will have their own story. So I think it's just, you know, how these buildings and these projects can become witnesses to the interwoven stories of humanity and people.
Actually, it's a really complex question, because my first instinct was you do need to be authentic in the stories you tell to a potential client, because they can detect when it's not true. So now that authenticity could be naive, it could be perhaps premature, and it might not necessarily be so sophisticated, but they can tell when you're passionate about certain things and they're ready to explore with you. Luis, since you were talking about De La Espada, I brought my students to see all these beautiful buildings, but at the end we visited his, not factory, but his gallery, and he told of a story that I was really convinced with Lyndon and Rossana, not because they were the best product designer, nor did I think that they are the best architects, but I noticed in them that sense of authenticity to find meaning in what they do. And that's the reason why he continued to work with us all these years. So my hope is that, or our hope is that whatever we do, the stories we make, they might not be that sophisticated. Imagine if I do a project here, I think maybe the first year or two, we might not actually assess the site or the project correctly. But I think what's important thing is to stay curious and to continually be honest and be authentic to oneself in the process of telling that story.
Great. Don, you want to ask your question? It's getting to you.
Thank you so much. I really love the way you situate the work, and it's so elegantly presented and intelligent. And one of the things I just wanted to touch upon is that in addition to this amazing practice, you are both deeply invested in being faculty and in academia, which one might imagine is not the most efficient thing to do as a practitioner, right? But yes, there's an incredible value in that investment that you take on. And I wonder if you could just talk a little bit to students about why you maintain your practice in conjunction with your ambitions relative to academia.
We've been obviously privileged to work under notable architects that also were teachers. Both of us worked for Michael Graves, Rossana for 6-7 years, and me for 11 years. Rossana studied under Enrique Miralles and Juan Navarro Baldewig at Princeton, and I was taught by Rafael Moneo at Harvard. And it was very important from the very beginning that despite their prolific career, they took time to mentor both of us. Michael Graves was very important in that, not just the practice itself, but there was always discussion on how you see buildings and how you perceive building. And I still remember Rafael Moneo saying, once you have an important practice, it's important to be able to give back. Now, when we decided to open our practice in China, initially we were so busy, so we didn't even have time to teach, and we had 3 young kids at that time. And it was a matter of survival because we didn't even have projects. I mean, all you see is Shanghai with all the high-rises, but no one gave us those high-rises. In fact, the buildings that were given to us was considered leftovers and ruins that no architects wants to touch. If you look at the Waterhouse, how we transform it, everyone wants to do that project now. But during that time, they went to 6, 7 different architects. We were the 7th. We were not the first choice. You have to remember that, right? They went for foreign firms, and some of them, in fact, one of my senior German architect working for me goes, Lyndon, I don't want to touch that project. It's all interiors, you know? It's only after it's being published, he said, I wish I was part of that project. I said, well, Dirk, it's too late now. But after the project went viral, we decided it was important for us that we also start sharing some of the things we know to the next generation. It was important for us, not just in not just in architecture, interior design, but also in product design, because we also do a lot of product design. It was important for us that that we bring a whole new generation of Chinese architects or Asian architects, so that, not to say that they would be better, but their voices could be equally heard. And that was very important to us. And we were content in being the bridge to the next generation. We decided that, our names and our reputation was not important. So we started to commit ourselves to teaching in Hong Kong and Shanghai for many years. It was not until 2017, when Deborah called us and we realized, wow, the best talent from Asia and China were coming to America. And if we were going to really seriously make a dent in academia, especially within the community that we're part of, that we need to go to the best schools to teach them and to influence them. And that's the reason why the 2 semesters at Yale, the 3 years at Harvard, and obviously, Rossana decided to take it to another level by chairing a school, which made my life so miserable and hard. But to be close to her, I decided to commit to Princeton the last 3 years. So it's been an amazing journey. And I always tell my students that, if you think you are fortunate to be in our studio, it's actually not. We're fortunate to have the opportunity to teach them, because through them, both of us learn so much. And the amount of ideas and energy they give to both of us, money can't buy. So to be able to say we sacrifice a lot would be too arrogant of a statement, because I think in the process of teaching, we gain so much from the students.
Yeah, I think, we're often asked the question, how do we balance so many different things, family life, practice, teaching, practice, being in the East, being in the West. I think our office has been in existence for about 20 some years.
20 exactly this year.
Okay, 20 years, and we've been together even longer.
I hope so.
The answer is there's no balance, and I will explain that. There's no balance because we basically we almost live and breathe architecture. So our kids grew up with us, traveling everywhere with us. I remember, as young as 6 months old.
Taking them out of schools.
I used to say, you're learning a lot more when you come to Sri Lanka with us to look at Jeffrey Bawa than to go to class. So we would take them out of classes, we would go travel and look at architectures. We run our office kind of like a school in a way, right? There's different studios, and then we're talking about design, like we discuss design critiques and reviews in schools. And so in that no balance, we kind of just, weave everything together. And since we are practicing like we are teaching, we kind of teach like we're practicing as well. And recently we've been asked, and it's not confidential, right? A plus U, is it? Okay, so recently we've been asked by A plus U to guest edit a editorial issue on design education, and our thesis is going to be, and we're working on this right now, it's going to be practice as education and education as practice, because, and it's not that it's the only way, but I think I'm seeing a gap right now in a lot of academia pursuits that we're leaving practice, or we don't have enough practitioners teaching design. And I'm from Princeton, meaning building is not, architecture is not necessarily building. And I know sometimes in certain contexts that might be a very controversial statement, but I'm giving that context so that you understand. I'm not bringing the only tradition. I'm not bringing a traditional viewpoint into architecture by wanting to bring practice back into academia. I just feel that we need a little more than we have right now. And so, because like Lyndon said, we've been so influenced by practitioners who teach. And you forgot to mention Liz Diller, she taught me studio. And also theorists who teach practice also really influenced me. Tony Vittler taught my first studio at Princeton, and it was incredible. So I think that's to say, because our practice and our teaching are interwoven, we see the benefits of it, so we want to bring it into academia.
But actually, to bring it to to this particular lecture, and so I'm saying this because Sherry is here as well. I've known of Faust's work, but purely as a prolific architect, not as an educator. So I was shocked to find out that he's been teaching here for 40 years. So that was refreshing to know, and also quite encouraging for us to realize that this can happen. Because if you see Goff's work, it's purely an amazing, prolific architect, but I'm not so sure if he taught a lot. Even Frank Lloyd Wright, I'm not so sure if he taught a lot. But there's a whole generation of amazing architects, including Faust, that made me realize that if they can do it, maybe we can also try to make it work and contribute.
Beautiful, beautiful. Well, so thank you so much, Rossana and Lyndon, for this amazing conversation and lecture. And for honoring us with your presence here in Auburn. Let's give them another round of applause.
Thank you.
Thank you for your invitation. Thank you.
Thank you. Sorry to keep this long, so most of you that have to go to dinner, my apologies if you guys are really hungry.
It's okay. We are very fortunate. And to finalize, we would like to thank again Sherry Faust. Thank you so much, Sherry. Your generosity and dedication makes these events possible. So thank you so much, Sherry. We would also like to thank Olivia Rodriguez, Angela Whitehead, Professors Christian Dach and Professor Julia Amorisano, and our CAADC advancement team, Marlea, Shelley, Christopher, and Alex, for all the hours and the hard work invested in the preparation of this lecture. We would also like to thank all of you, students and faculty and staff and public in general, for joining us this evening. And I would like to invite you to the reception that is just happening outside this room. Thank you so much for your presence.